Thank you, Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise to speak today's budget motion. I've spent the last 2 months gathering feedback from my constituents using a variety of methods, including a budget survey that I sent out to all 28,000 homes in my riding. I've spoke to hundreds of people at trade shows, meetings, and constituency appointments, as well as hearing from those who shared their thoughts with me through emails and letters. After all of this consultation, I believe allowing the budget to pass is the right decision. Was it an easy choice to make? No, it was not. But I am confident that I am making the responsible decision. And that's what it really boils down to. Making the right decision is never easy. It takes work. It takes a willingness to listen to viewpoints that are different from your own, and it takes time. I believe my caucus colleagues and I were absolutely right in taking our time and talking with people before we made a decision, because there's not one single member of my caucus who thinks that they know better than the people that they represent. And that's a fundamental part of democracy that some individuals have lost sight of. We were not sent here to represent our own views or our caucus's views. We were sent here to speak on behalf of each and every constituent, regardless of whether they voted for us or not. We have an obligation to listen to each and every one of those voices and do our best to arrive at consensus that best represents their views. We strongly believe that we are here to represent the people in our ridings, and that we are not so arrogant as to believe that we know better than the people we represent. And I think it's unfortunate that there are individuals in this legislature who believe otherwise. In fact, I find it very disturbing that there is an entire caucus that has no interest in listening, not only to their constituents, but to anybody in this province. And that they are so arrogant about their we know better approach that they even put it in black and white. Speaker, just over a month and a half ago, the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs held pre-budget consultations. After a strong fight, the people living in the Northwest were able to share their thoughts on the upcoming budget, including what should be in it and what shouldn't be in it. We heard feedback from groups like Hoshizaki House in Dryden, First Step Women's Shelter in Thunder Bay, the municipality of Ignace, the municipality of Pickle Lake, the Experimental Lake Support Group, and Shoal Lake 39 First Nation, and that's mostly just from my riding. The pre-budget hearing process gave us feedback from people, groups, and organizations in this province who wanted an input on the direction this government is taking. I believe very strongly that these groups and organizations have this right, because this government isn't the NDP government, it's not the Conservatives government, and it's not the Liberals government, it's the people's government. And each and every time we have an election, MPPs from each riding are sent here to represent their ridings and govern in the interests of the people. We in the opposition have an obligation to ensure that the government does not stray from this task. It's pretty cut and dry. So when the people of this province take the time to provide feedback, I believe we should listen. And I know that my caucus colleagues share this opinion. Unfortunately, that view, that we're here to represent the people who elected us, isn't shared by the members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus. And not only do they believe that they know better, they took time to put it in writing. And that took the form of the dissenting opinion in the report from the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs. And I'd like to take a moment to share a few quotes. And this is what the Progressive Conservative Caucus wrote in response to the submissions that the people brought forward. And I quote, "Ontario simply has no money to continue funding everything. These are representative of our sincere belief that our approach, and not that of these unrealistic requests," again referring to the presentations that people made, "would better inform the process. We have formed recommendations to respond on an array of issues. Our party has a comprehensive and concrete plan to tackle jobs, control spending, and get our economy back on track. That should inform the budget process, not unworthy political relations initiatives by the Liberal Party." Wow. That is shameful. So there we have it in black and white, straight from the PC caucus. Don't share your thoughts because we know better than you. despite having 12 sections to supplement that statement, including one on rural Ontario. They can't be bothered to cobble together a plan for Northern Ontario. They're telling us that they have a comprehensive plan, Speaker, but their plan does not even include Northern Ontario, and that's because they know better. It's shameful that they hold this view because I believe that the Mary Berglund Community Health Centre in Ignace needs a new facility and rent certainty from this government. I believe that women's shelters in our region need support to combat crumbling infrastructure. I believe that Northwestern Ontario municipalities need support from this government for vital infrastructure that will allow them to attract economic opportunities to create jobs for people in Northwestern Ontario.
Absolutely.
I believe that we need an east-west road corridor to the Ring of Fire to help communities in the Northwest to maximize the benefits of our natural resources. I believe this government needs to enter into a respectful dialogue with First Nations to ensure that projects such as the twinning of Highway 17 near Kenora moves forward without unnecessary delays. And I believe that the government should intervene, and fortunately it has taken some steps after the hearings to save the experimental lakes area in my riding. Unfortunately, the Progressive Conservatives do not support these initiatives. Speaker, this isn't an isolated incident. Last year, when the PCs brought forward a bill to repeal the Far North Act, they mentioned how groups like Anishinaabe-Aski Nation, known as NAN, and the Northwestern Ontario Municipal Association, known as NOMA, were opposed to the original act. They even went so far as to read parts of letters from these organizations that said as much. Unfortunately, rather than read the whole letter, the member who brought forward this bill ignored paragraphs that clearly stated that these organizations were opposed to scrapping the bill altogether without first creating a replacement.
Wow.
But once again, who cares what the people think, because the PCs know better.
Exactly.
They say they know better, and unfortunately we're left in the dark as to what they really want, because rather than be a part of the process, they said, we're not the government, so we're going home, for both minority budgets. Rather than respecting the wishes of the voters of this province and work together in a minority situation, they chose to sit this one out and instead accomplish nothing. Absolutely nothing. I can tell you from that same feedback that I heard from Conservatives living across the Northwest that they are furious that members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus rejected the budget months before it was even written, again, for a second time. And that, Speaker, is not responsible. There's a very powerful and meaningful quote that came from the 2011 Federal Leaders Debate, and I think it's very relevant to the situation we're having in Ontario right now. And that's when the late Jack Layton asked Liberal leader Michael Ignatieff how he expected to get a promotion to Prime Minister if he didn't show up for work.
Right.
I think that same question could be asked of the official opposition right now. We were sent here to do a job, and instead they've been pouting for over a year and a half. I've spent a lot of time focusing on what's not responsible. I'd like, if I could, to shift focus to speak about what is responsible. Being responsible is living up to your obligations. It's about making a commitment to do the right thing. As I said earlier in this speech, it's not always easy. It involves hard work, compromise, and a willingness to work with people who you may not necessarily agree with all the time. And that's what we've been doing with this budget. We've been compromising.
Absolutely.
We knew going in that we would not come out with an NDP budget. We were under no illusions that we were going to get everything that we wanted, but we resolved to work in the best interest of the hard-working people of this province and to roll up our sleeves and enter into a constructive and meaningful dialogue with the government. You see, Speaker, leadership isn't dictating to people what you're going to do. Leadership is working with others to accomplish goals, expressing a willingness to make difficult decisions, and having a desire to effect positive change, without worrying about who's going to take credit or get the accolades. Leadership is understanding that it's getting results that matter. And what the Progressive Conservatives wouldn't do, the NDP did do. And that's because we have a respect for the voters who sent us here. We rolled up our sleeves, and after listening to people from across this province, we came up with 5 reasonable requests for the budget. This included a 5-day home care guarantee, a 15% reduction in auto insurance premiums, a First Start Jobs program that will help young people enter the workforce and stay there, steps that would allow people on social assistance to keep a small amount of their employment earnings that would help them to escape the cycle of dependency that our system creates, and closing unnecessary corporate tax loopholes to make it easier for the province to balance its budget. 3 of these, being home care, auto insurance, and youth jobs, are important northern priorities. Since I participated in the debate on the budget just over 2 weeks ago, I'm not going to rehash all of the statistics that came out of the more than 28,000 budget surveys I sent out, but I will reiterate that more than 90% of the respondents indicated a high to very high support of reduced auto insurance premiums, while there was also very high support for increased access to home care, closing tax loopholes, and youth jobs. While it is disappointing the government wasn't too interested in closing corporate tax loopholes, such as the ability to write off luxury boxes for sporting events and expensive dinners, they did meet us halfway on a number of these priorities, including committing to home care, which will in turn also reduce costs and enhance healthcare services. In fact, on May 10th, I participated in the RNAO's Take Your MPP to Work Day in Sioux Lookout, where I spent a great deal of time learning exactly how our push to improve access to home care will improve service and reduce costs at their hospital, the Menoyawan Hospital. During that visit, it was pointed out that at any given time, 1/3 to 1/2 of the patients who are admitted to the hospital are not there because they need to be in the hospital, but because the waiting lists for other services such as long-term care and home care are so long that they cannot be discharged. Instead of being able to receive treatment in the comfort of their homes or being transferred to a long-term care facility that's better suited to their needs and more cost-efficient, these patients are costing the system $2,000 per day because the correct investments have not been made. In fact, I met one gentleman who had been in the hospital since October because the home care services he needs in the Sioux Lookout area are not presently available. Since October, his stay in the hospital has cost the healthcare system $2,000 a day because small frontline investments weren't made. And what's worse is while receiving the treatment that home care could have provided, he developed a highly contagious infection, which meant that he has been living in virtual isolation since that time. Home care is a huge issue in the north, and with people relying on emergency rooms, being admitted to the hospital, or being denied service altogether because the waiting list is up to 6 months in my region, that is just not acceptable. And while this government has stopped short of making a 5-day guarantee that we had requested, I can assure those of you who are watching and those of you on the government side that we will be on you each and every day to make sure that the investment pays off and that the people who live not only in the north but all across Ontario are receiving the care they deserve. But Speaker, approving this budget isn't only about the commitments that we have received from the government. It's about delivering results and ensuring those results are done in a timely and cost-effective manner. And that's why we ask this government to create a financial accountability office, which will review government spending proposals before the money is spent. This is basically the creation of a taxpayer watchdog to ensure that not only are the results people expect delivered, but that they're done so in a responsible, cost-effective manner. This new office will safeguard taxpayer dollars from future scandals such as Orange and eHealth. It will ensure that monies budgeted will be spent effectively. For instance, with home care, the NDP believes the results that we need, the 5-day home care guarantee, can be accomplished with a $30 million investment, not the Liberals' proposed $260 million investment that comes without a service guarantee. Once in place, this new office will ensure that not only that the money actually is only invested that is required, no more. So I think that will help to determine whether actually we need the $30 million or do we need the $260 million, and it's about more value for the money. The new Financial Accountability Office will ensure that not only will the problem go away, but that the extra cash is caught in a safety net to be there for other priorities and projects. As many say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And that really is the situation that we've been faced with in Ontario. One government comes into power, wastes a bunch of money, gets caught in a scandal, and so we replace it with another one that promises that it won't do the same thing. It won't do the thing that the other guy did. And then it turns around and it does the same thing. And it sort of reminds me of the old Tommy Douglas story of Mouseland. And so the electorate throws them out and the cycle repeats itself again. What we're saying right now is instead of repeating the cycle, let's fix the problem. Let's bring someone in who can plug the leak before the dam breaks, and that's the Financial Accountability Office. We need this oversight in Ontario now. We need it because far too often we have parties and governments that propose things that sound great, such as the legislated wage freezes that the party to my right keeps touting, but which end up costing taxpayers tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars more, essentially throwing money out the window because it makes them look good or it's a good soundbite. By approving this office, we're giving the taxpayers of this province the extra oversight, a voice that can say, wait a minute, what about British Columbia? What about this situation or that situation where the wage freezes cost taxpayers more? And that's what we need, and I think it's shameful that my progressive conservative colleagues do not support the financial safeguards, and I can't seem to figure out why. They claim to want to save taxpayers money, so why not do something that actually accomplishes that end? Because as Tommy Douglas stated, rather than going from the black cats to the white cats and then back again, why not actually do something about the problem? Why not create a system of accountability that will be there for this government and the next government and the one after that? It seems reasonable. Instead of saying, we don't like the government, so we're going to take our ball and we're going to go home, why not say, well, we may not agree with the voters' choice, we respect their decision, and now it's time to roll up our sleeves and get to work. Because there's so much more to worry about in this province than passing the budget. The pressing issue isn't who's sitting in the Premier's chair. It's what can we as a collective group of elected officials and individuals do to create jobs, to help seniors, to help families, and to move this province forward. It's about working with the person beside you, the member across from you, and each and every member who you need to work with to deliver results. 2 weeks ago when this House last sat, I raised an issue about a mining company that was having approval for its environmental assessment terms of reference unnecessarily delayed. After I asked the question in question period, the Minister of Northern Development and Mines came up and said, we need to work together on this issue. And by working together, that approval was granted within 2 hours. For months, I've been talking with the Minister of Infrastructure to resolve a situation facing the Mary Berkland Community Health Centre. This issue is pressing and it needs to be resolved. Throwing $100 million out the window for an election just to come back with the same result is not fixing the problem. It's irresponsible. The responsible thing to do is to continue to work, continue to fight, and continue to respect the people who sent us here to do a job, a very important job. I'm committed to the people who sent me here and to doing this job to the very best of my ability. And I hope that all of you, everyone in this House, will join me in putting the best interests of our constituents first. Thank you.
Good job.